Camilla will talk about change from her perspective. Camilla, why did you want to change? And what did you become in the process? And what did you change about yourself?
Well, John, we're diving in with a very philosophical question, aren't we, to get ourselves
Indeed.
started today? And actually, you are probably touching on a point that is hugely pertinent in my life at the moment, in as much as I am attending a philosophy course. I'm a student of philosophy, and philosophy is, I suppose, a way of life that is all about embracing change. So, with that deeply philosophical question, where shall I even begin? But change, I suppose, for all of us is a constant. We live in a world that is constantly changing. We have an external environment that will keep moving. And I always think if we're not changing and adapting and evolving, well, you know what? We're standing still because the whole outside world is constantly on the move. So it behoves us to equip ourselves with, I suppose, the mindset to embrace change and to be willing to change and to be flexible in the face of change. Some of the change that we bring about, and a lot of it really is about making conscious decisions about how we want to spend our lives. So I've certainly led a life that's been full of change, whether I've liked it or not. And how I've responded to that has dictated a lot of things. I currently work as a communication coach. I have been running my own business now constantly without change for 7+ years with my fabulous business partner, Sarah Travers.
Very good.
But if I look at our business today relative to where the business was, where our client expectations were, where people's needs were now versus 7-8 years ago when we set up, it's chalk and cheese. There's no way that we would still be in business. There's no way that customers would still be coming to us if we hadn't moved in the direction that our clients asked of us. So look, change is something that is bestowed upon us as a gift. And it's up to us to really invest in ways to make that happen, make that work for us.
It's a very good introductory answer, Camilla. And I do agree with you that change is a constant in the business and in personal life. I also agree with you with the fact that it's how we respond to change is what really counts in life. Because I've seen it all too often in the past when, say, the MD of a company announces a change program. Suddenly people get defensive and they become worried about their job because they feel there's going to be redundancies here. They become defensive and they don't accept change very readily. So what you're saying there is very, very true. If, on the other hand, we become a captain of change and get on board with change and the change program, we actually make life much easier for ourselves, and we become a person who's seen as a leader, not just a follower or a begrudger at the very worst. So I agree with you there. So rolling back the years, Camilla, looking at your LinkedIn profile, before you ever set up your communications business, you qualified in IT, you worked in IT, and you were also a stockbroker in the City of London. What made you want to move from a very successful role, and I suppose you could say stressful role, into becoming a communications coach?
Yeah, it's a great question, John. Look, I have a background in technology. I studied computer science and began my career as a software developer, well noticed. And really, as I was going through school, let's face it, what's for you doesn't pass you by. The sort of things that I always enjoyed at school were the humanities, truth be told. They were the subjects that really brought me to life, things like English or French or any of those sorts of more creative subjects. But, I was a child of a time when Ireland was perhaps not the booming economic powerhouse that it is today. I grew up during very tough times, and I grew up in a family that experienced very tough times. Interest rates went through the roof. Back in the early 1990s, their interest rates at one point, I think, were hitting almost 20%. So I think for me, when I was thinking about a career, I really wanted something that was going to offer security. And at that time, Ireland was absolutely investing in bringing in foreign companies and bringing in foreign direct investment. And it looked to me, from my 18-year-old self, it looked to me as though computers and technology were going to be the way forward. So I decided I would study a degree in computer science, even though perhaps that wasn't necessarily where my first love was. And it absolutely was a brilliant foundation for almost everything that I've done ever since, because I may not be directly working in the technology industry right now, but I work closely each and every day with technology clients. So having that background and having that understanding is absolutely key to helping to understand their challenges, their frustrations, their problems, and how to overcome them. So look, I worked as a software developer. I studied computer science. And look, here's the thing. When I graduated from university, how would I put this? Maybe it was a little bit of a broken heart. But anyway, I decided that the island of Ireland just wasn't going to be big enough for the both of us when I was making my career decisions. So I decided I would take off for Tokyo at that stage. Tokyo was 5,000 miles away. I was a complete home bird. I had gone to university barely an hour down the road from where I'd grown up. I'd hardly left the farm that I had grown up on. So to jump on a plane and travel 5,000 miles as a conscious, active decision, now that absolutely altered the course of my life. When you talk about change, that absolutely was a massive change. Culture change, language change, food change, just about everything you could imagine, John, was changed in my life quite literally overnight. But it was something that I absolutely loved. When you go to a country like Japan, which is so completely different to Ireland, where I'd come from, well, I must have loved it because I ended up staying there for 6 years. And at the end of 6 years, sadly, this was a change that definitely wasn't bestowed upon me. In our family, we lost my father. He died of cancer. And I was all of those thousands of miles away and started to feel like that was really far away from home. And that was something that catalyzed my now husband, we weren't married at the time, to pack up and to move back a little bit closer to home. And at that stage, we moved back to the city of London. By this stage, I had taken a shift from technology into the world of stockbroking. And so I moved from the financial center of Tokyo to the financial center of London, where I worked as a broker for a number of years. And then the babies came along, and that was time for another change, because bringing up children in London was not where either my husband or I wanted to be. So we took the decision to move back to Ireland at that stage. Once my oldest son was starting school, that was a really big pivotal time in the life of our family. And we decided to move back to Ireland and to take on a new change to a new lifestyle. And that really, it was the beginning of the path that led me towards setting up my own business as a communication coach.
Very good. Very, very detailed answer there. And I understand what you're talking about there, because I do remember the very high interest rates that impacted the UK and Ireland in the very early 90s. And it actually induced a recession in the UK. And I think almost 50,000 people lost their jobs in the city of London as a result, due to the downturn, particularly in the investment banking sector in London, because mergers and acquisitions at the time became pretty few and far between, because companies were rushing to reduce the amount of debt on their balance sheet. And I do remember the old Midland Bank nearly went bankrupt and had to be taken over by a foreign bank. I think it was HSBC, I think.
HSBC, you're right. Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I do remember having a conversation on this very gift show with Anne-Marie Graham. And she grew up in rural County Monaghan. And she told me a story about moving to the UK. She qualified as a nurse in Beaumont Hospital, and she worked for a couple of years there. And then she headed off to London, and she found it that a great experience overall. But when she went over there first, no more than myself, when I went over there in the 1980s, she was very green, and I was very green the same myself. I also concur with you in terms of careers guidance, I suppose you could say it, or the lack of it in schools in Ireland at the time. And I left school in the 1980s and went to college, and I became an accountant. But I fell into accountancy because I always thought it was going to be a safe qualification to have. I'm still a qualified accountant today. And for me, it's a great business qualification. But I thought I wanted to do accountancy because this is a safe qualification. I get a good, understanding of the business world, which I have, in fairness. But accountancy wasn't the right profession for me in hindsight. And hindsight is 20/20 vision, as we all know. And that's why I had to take a step back and find my own purpose in life, which is to be a career coach and paid professional speaker. And I love the challenge. So moving forward, you found your vocation in life, I suppose you could say, and you set up your communications business. What did you learn about yourself as a professional and as a person in that process?
Well, isn't it great when you have the opportunity to coach other people, John? Because a lot of the time you see yourself reflected back to you, all of the fears and inhibitions that are so obvious when you see somebody else, you suddenly slowly start to realize they're the exact same thing that is holding me back. So lots and lots. My clients teach me every single day of the week. They really do. And I suppose initially I referred to the fact that our business has evolved, but initially when Sarah and I set up Bespoke Communications in the very early days, it was really driven by a need that we saw in the market. Sarah at that time was working as a news anchor. She was a news anchor on BBC Newsline here in Northern Ireland, and where we're based, and also had done some lifestyle TV presenting for UTV, the second TV channel in Northern Ireland.
Very good.
She spent so much time working with people who had amazing stories to share, but very often the minute a camera would pop up, the nerves would take over, and this amazing story would literally wither on the vine in front of her. She'd think, oh my goodness, there's so much that I want to put on TV. There's so much of this story that I want to tell in order to help other people or to entertain people. And literally she'd have somebody standing in front of her who was a quivering wreck. So she recognized the value of media training and of presentation coaching. And for me, coming at things from very much a business background, I just saw all the time people standing up in front of their audiences. And like Sarah's interviewees, I saw people who had so much capacity, so much capability, but that reluctance to stand up in front of a group was really holding them back, was really stopping them from growing their business, from progressing in their career. And we thought that, we'd made all of the mistakes ourselves, and we thought that we could absolutely have some tools and techniques that would help people to overcome that. And look, our business has evolved now into entire leadership development programs where we work with people as they progress through their careers and perhaps want to take a pivot, or perhaps want to change, or perhaps want to move from being a technical expert into leading and developing and managing others. And so much of what happens within the world of communication coaching is pertinent and relevant in no matter where you are within the organization. So, a lot of it came from our own hard-earned experience, truth be told. I certainly, one of the very formative experiences that I talk about refers to one of the times when I was at work in the City of London. I worked in business development, John. So my job was to be out in front of clients or in front of prospective clients literally every day of my life. So standing up and speaking in front of groups, I didn't particularly harbor any inhibitions about that. And I'd worked out how that worked and how to do that. And on this particular day, my boss was on holiday. It was a summer's day, and he was off having a lovely time with his family on a beach in Greece. And he had asked me to stand in for him at the senior leadership team meeting. And our team, we were flat out. We were, obviously, our business development was going from strength to strength because the team, we were just completely under-resourced. And my job was to go up to the boardroom and to make a case for additional headcount. We needed to get budget for that. And so you don't go and stand in front of your chief executive and all of the senior bodies within the bank without having done your homework. So off I went. I'd done all my research. I had looked at the return on investment. I had everything at my fingertips. And I went upstairs on the appointed day to deliver my presentation. When I got to the 5th floor, the door in front of me was closed. I took my seat outside and waited to be invited in. And in due course, the door opened and in I went to the boardroom with a semicircle of the chief executive, the chief operating officer, all of the division heads for the bank seated around the table. And I got going. And about a minute into my presentation, I heard a voice say to me, Camilla, why don't you leave it there and just email us a spreadsheet with the numbers instead? And I kind of looked around the table, and as I looked around, nobody even looked up from their papers But I looked over at the meeting chair, and with a nod of their head, I realized that I was being cut off, that that was the end to my presentation. And it was kind of like time stood still. It was just like everything turned into slow motion. And I did the walk back out the door that I had just come through. And look, I just went downstairs, packed my stuff, and that was me done for the day. I was mortified. And, you know, it took me, I don't know how long it took me to get over that, but I definitely felt it was really hard to go into work the next day. And it was just, I felt as though my entire reputation had just been trashed completely. But, you know, I did pick myself up from that. I don't know how long it took. From memory, it seems like it probably was about 5 years, but it might have been 5 weeks or 5 days. But I decided that wasn't going to happen to me again. And I realized that I had just got that presentation wrong. And I went off and I did a presentation skills course. I decided to professionalize. I had worked out how to present, but I knew that what I was doing was I was a one-trick pony. I had a skill set, and I just needed to be more adaptable and flexible. And that presentation skills course absolutely transformed the way that I learned to present information. And I got myself 2 amazing mentors who helped me on that journey. So I would take to the stage then at conferences after that. I would represent the bank in front of audiences of anything from, 10 to hundreds of people. And I did that with confidence. And so that's a really strong memory for me. So that when I work with people now, I just really want nobody to ever have that horrific experience, that they can have the tools and the mindset and the techniques that they need to do a great job of that presentation the first time around.
I do remember working with a man who was my opposite in many respects as a person. He was very extroverted. I am slightly introverted. He was very sensory. I'm very much into trusting my intuition. And he's very much a judging type of person. He doesn't judge people, but he's very much into the here and now, to-do list structure. I'm a completely off the wall perceiving type of person. I like the least amount of structure. I like to keep my options open. Anyway, one day he had to make a presentation to the management team, and he was talking about finance. And he went up, and he was obviously nervous, even though this man was a high energy individual. He had his back to the audience, and all you could hear was the coins tingling in his pocket. He had his both hands in his pockets, and he was ruffling the coins in his pockets. You could hardly hear a word he said because he had his back to the audience. The next time a presentation was due to be made in front of the management team, he said to me, "John, I want you to make that presentation for me because I think you're a better communicator or a better speaker than I am." And that's when I saw that I had an ability to speak in public. But it's taken me many years, of course, to hone the skill to get it to the level I've got it at today. And I want to go further, of course. So going back to your communications business, you started out doing communications training. What was the trigger for you and your business colleague to move into the whole area of leadership coaching?
Oh, John, it was such a natural segue. You start to work with people, and clients come to you with ever bigger challenges, with ever bigger issues that they need to tackle. So at this stage, we now work with a team of experts, people who have expertise in areas that we don't have, in order to expand out the offering that we can, in an agile way, deliver to clients. Clients' demands are constantly changing, and there are only 2 of us. There's just Sarah and myself, and we won't have the answers to everything. So I think the key there is collaboration, and I think the key is to find people with expertise outside of our own particular domain. It's one of the big things for companies nowadays is, as companies grow or as companies evolve, it's making sure that their managers and that their leaders are equipped with the skills, the flexibility of mindset to really embrace the changes that the world throws at them, and look at the resilience of companies over the course of the last 2-3 years. The COVID was thrown at them, and look, we don't need to get into everything else that's happened since, but cost of living crisis. But, more than that, I just think that people now working in companies are expecting more from their leadership. They're expecting more empathy. They're expecting
Very true.
They're more understanding. They're expecting that people will take more account of their personal circumstances. So I think as leaders and managers, we can't stand still. It's a much more diverse landscape now. We have people coming into our companies from all sorts of backgrounds, and we need to be equipped with the skills and with the understanding to help everybody to thrive at work.
Very interesting answer. And have you found, due to the COVID-19 pandemic crisis and the cost of living crisis, that customers of yours are expecting you to develop online programs in addition to providing in-person programs, because they want that bit of time to sit back and learn for themselves, as opposed to going to that boardroom or going to a remote hotel for 3 or 4 days to learn about leadership skills or management skills? Have you found that trend in your business?
Yeah, there definitely is. It's a very flexible way of delivering content. And, collaborations and partnerships are always important, because I think I've already talked about the fact that you've got your own skills, and sometimes you need other people to come and round that off for you. Well, when the pandemic struck, Sarah and I at Bespoke, we were so blessed with the fact that one of our clients is a world leader in e-learning, in delivering hybrid learning solutions, in supporting organizations with learning and development for their own teams, organizations of all sizes. So we were really a live events business in March 2020, at the time that suddenly everybody got locked up and nobody was allowed to go out. So literally overnight, our business got closed down. So every event that we had in the diary booked for 6 months and beyond, suddenly everything was at least put on hold or postponed or cancelled. So, it's certainly it was a very frightening time to think, goodness, how long is this going to last, and where are we going to be by the end of this? But luckily, we had the support of Learning Pool, an amazing company who, at that time, as you can imagine, if you're a company that has clients the size of the Football Association or the International Olympic Committee, or you name a household brand, and I'm sure Learning Pool is providing e-learning support for their people. When you imagine a company that has clients of that size, and this says a lot for the culture at Learning Pool, where they were willing to turn around and provide resource and support and help for a company of 2 people who were floundering and struggling and needed to adapt and needed to flex and needed to do it quite literally overnight in order to change our business model. Well, that's where we went to get the unrivaled expertise that we needed in order to adapt and to put to be able to start hosting our content online and delivering enterprise grade e-learning platforms to our clients, because most of our clients certainly aren't companies of 2 people. We support organizations of all shapes and sizes. And so that change absolutely has happened for us. So now that we've emerged, we're in a post-pandemic world, it's given us the flexibility to offer programs where absolutely we can have that face-to-face part to a learning program if that's something that the organization wants. And, there is huge value to bringing people together in a room. John, you and I met last in a room 2 weeks ago, and there's something very special about bringing people together and the fertilization of ideas and the chats that happen, the impromptu chats that happen, and the sorts of personal connections that get developed when you bring people together face to face. But when you can balance that with the flexibility and the convenience of online learning, sometimes that hybrid approach can really work. So part of your program you deliver face-to-face, and then you can segue parts of that to online delivery. And when it's backed up then with an amazing online learning platform that allows people to comment and to communicate and to share ideas as the program progresses, well, then you've got the best of all worlds. And they are skills and that's capacity that we've developed hugely now over the last 2-3 years. It's something that I think we would have been looking at anyway. But certainly, our relationship with Learning Pool has accelerated that probably by 5 years.
That's a great example of collaboration where a much bigger client has gone out of their way to provide help and learning tools to a much smaller supplier to help them to develop an online program. I think that is a fantastic example of collaboration between two businesses. So well done to you and your client for achieving such a collaborative outcome, and good luck for the future in that regard. So just going back to your own story there, Camilla, you mentioned at the very outset you're currently studying philosophy, and you were always interested in the humanities in school. So what triggered within you to study philosophy?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Actually, I'll tell you the answer to that one. I think the universe provides. This is a course that I'm doing with the School of Philosophy and Economic Science based here in Ireland. I think there are similar organizations in many, many countries around the world. There's such an interest in philosophy, isn't there, globally? But anyway, this school has been around in Ireland for a very long time. And, I think 20 plus years ago, it's definitely a long, long time, myself and my mother started the Introduction to Philosophy course all those years ago. And then something happened. I can't quite remember what happened. But anyway, we were interrupted in about week 3 and we never went back to it. I don't know, life just got in the way and changes happened and we never went back to it. So quite recently, I was working with a client. She was on a program of mine and we were sitting in a session, just like you and I are sitting here today. We're sitting in a one-to-one session. And she said to me, just as a throwaway comment, she said something about an ad that she heard on the radio for a philosophy course. And this was on a Friday afternoon. And I asked her a little bit more detail. She said, oh, I can't really quite remember, but it's starting in such and such a place on next Monday. And I thought, right. And so I made a little mental note, got off the call, Googled it. And by Friday evening, I had signed up for this philosophy course that was starting on the Monday. So there was probably something in the back of my mind that always wanted to go back to that course. And it just took that little trigger to make it happen. It's amazing. It's something that I find really challenging because so much of it is about the spirit of mindfulness and meditation. And John, I have a very busy mind. So it's this idea of mindfulness is something that I really need to keep myself grounded and to keep, in the present moment and, to keep anxiety under control and to, not get too bogged down in things that happen. But I find it a real challenge to practice. But you've got to keep trying. You've got to practice what you preach.
True. I agree with you there. I was just watching there the other day, Operation Transformation, the current series in RTE. And one of the coaches or experts, as what you could call them, on the Operation Transformation team was talking to a school teacher about the whole importance of being in the moment and practicing mindfulness, because the person has a busy family life. They also have a school to run. They have teachers out sick. They need to find substitute teachers. There's ongoing building works in the school. The person is becoming very, very stressed and in danger of burnout. And one of the coaches said, start practicing mindfulness and be in the moment and just gather your thoughts. Stop thinking of everything else. Just gather your thoughts and achieve peace of mind and re-energize yourself and get back on the horse then and get back to work. So that's a very good point that you're making there. So Camilla, you grew up in Navan, you studied in Dublin, lived in Tokyo, London, and you're now living in Northern Ireland. What is next for Camilla Long?
What a great question, John. I'd love to say I have a 5-year plan, but I think where I live is just, look, I'm biased, but I think it's the most spectacular piece of coastline on the whole island. It's so unspoilt. We have the place to ourselves, for several months of the year. Increasingly, actually, the several months are getting compressed because people are maybe starting to find our little secrets. So most definitely, I think where I live is somewhere that I want to continue being invested in. I want to continue living here. But, I'm about to experience a little bit of a change in my own life this year as my youngest son is leaving school, which means that I suppose there's a certain amount of responsibility that will be lifted. I won't have to be at home as much. I certainly won't have to be around as much. So come September this year, all sorts of opportunities open up for travel. And with the ability to work remotely, I think that is going to give a lot of flexibility to life for the next 3 to 5 years anyway. In terms of the specifics around that, I don't have a grand plan. I definitely think a couple of mindfulness retreats would be good. And I have spent time in India. I have spent time in Nepal. So there are two countries that I would really love to go back and experience again. I haven't been in several years. Having, spent so much time in Japan, that's definitely somewhere that I'm going to be inside the next 12 months. On holiday, not going to be bringing bespoke communications there to set up a Tokyo branch or anything like that. And I'm looking forward to really all of the opportunity that life will bring over the next 5 years. I think a lot of the change that will come will perhaps be guided and shaped by external events. I don't necessarily know that I'm going to be making active choices there, but I'll make decisions as opportunities arise.
This has been an amazing conversation with Camilla today. So I'd like to thank you for your time. And in terms of takeaways, quite a few takeaways from this conversation today. And the first one is, as you mentioned earlier on, Camilla, that change is a constant, whether it's in business or in our personal lives. And how we react to change is very, very important. You have to get on board with change and to see it as a positive, not a threat. You also mentioned there about the fact that it's so important if we're busy in our lives, whether it's professional life or personal life, to practice mindfulness and to take time out to focus on yourself and your needs and to try and just get peace of mind before you get back on the horse and you get back to your usual activities. You also mentioned about a very collaborative situation between a client and your own business, where they give you help and support to develop an online learning package. And that's very, very collaborative. That's something that I'd like the audience to think very carefully about, is trying to achieve collaboration between yourself, clients, and suppliers. They are win-win situations. And also, I think with life, you mentioned there just a minute ago, Camilla, that don't try and plan too far ahead, but have a goal that's worth aiming for and worth failing for. Set massive goals, but don't try and achieve everything in one goal. Take it one piece at a time. And also, in any business that's successful, you start out with one income stream, but develop more income streams as you develop your capabilities, because that's how a business remains successful and relevant to its clients. As you said there earlier on, that you have clients who want online learning, and then you've got clients who want to learn in person. You have to be able to adapt to their requirements and meet their specific needs to stay relevant for your clients. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience before I let you go?
Well, John, that was an astute and concise summary. So my admiration goes out to you for pulling all of that together. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you today. It's been a real pleasure.
You're most welcome, Camilla. And on that note, I'll bring today's conversation to a close.